Hey, Boston buddies. Welcome to hopefully the first in a series of chats with Bart and various other icons of the running world. I appreciate you, Bart, joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Vince.
You're welcome. So for those who haven't met Bart yet, Bart was the chief running officer of Runner's World from about 1987 on until about 2 years ago.
Yes, I worked at Runner's World from 1987 to 2018 till I retired.
Nice. And while you were there, you kind of you were also known as the mayor of running.
Yeah, I don't know where that moniker came from, but I got labeled that probably 20 years ago and got introduced as the mayor of running and seen it posted everywhere. There was never an election, and there really is no mayor running, but somehow I got that title, and I actually loved it because it was a fun title to have and try to live up to being the mayor of running.
Right. And I guess it was about 2008. You wrote a book called My Life on the Run about your experiences while at Runner's World.
My Life on the Run debuted at the Boston Marathon in 2008.
Nice.
Finished it up in like December of 2007. Worked with my co-author Kathleen Parrish, who was a big help, and finished it up like December 2007. Got the first copies, literally walking into the expo at the Boston Marathon, tearing apart the shipment that was sent there. The first time I saw the book come to fruition.
Right. I remember reading that, and I just kept thinking, how do I get this job?
Yeah, that's what I hear all the time. Yeah.
Right. But now you wrote about some really interesting adventures in there. One of them, or a couple of them, were you did Mount Kilimanjaro?
Kilimanjaro, I'm sure was in. Yeah, I did a lot of races all over the world, but Kilimanjaro was one that got highlighted in there because I think I did the Kilimanjaro Marathon 3 times, and the one time I was there, I got really sick. I had Lyme disease, which I contracted in the U.S. Didn't know it at the time, and I wasn't feeling great, but I didn't think I was really that sick. And then when I got to Africa, I really got sick. And climbing Kilimanjaro, I got pretty rough shape.
How far?
A lot of times in hospitals in Tanzania, ended up going to a better hospital in Kenya, and then I still wasn't getting any better, so I had to get back home in the end to really save my life. I was pretty sick.
Oh wow! But you did it. Yeah. But was that the last time you did it, or was that the first time?
That was the last time. Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't been back to Africa actually since then. I used to go to East Africa quite a bit back in the late 80s, early 90s, but I haven't been back since. And that was, I believe, 1996 when I got pretty sick and I got real sick on Kilimanjaro up at about 16,000 feet.
Wow, that's amazing.
I think the altitude kind of brought the infection to another level and really got me pretty sick. So,
right. Well,
happy to be here and alive when you spend a lot of time in third world hospitals in places like Tanzania and Kenya, and I was also in a hospital in Cairo, Egypt. They were all just trying to break my fever. I was 103 fever for day after day after day. I was in pretty rough shape.
Wow.
Thank God I got home.
Yes. Glad you're with us.
Yes.
But you've done a bunch of races though, but I guess one of the things that you're most famous for is the Yasso 800s.
Yeah, I've heard of those Yasso 800 things.
You're the actual Yasso from Yasso 800s.
Yeah. It's so funny to hear people, they do the workout for a long time and they have no idea of the origins, and then they I'll be at like the Boston Expo or something and someone say, hey, those Yasso 800s we do, that's the guy. And they're like, people say like, oh, I didn't know that we're named after a person. I thought it was just some kind of crazy workout kind of thing. It's pretty fun.
Right.
But my favorite Yasso 800 story, because I always tell runners, don't ever have a workout named after you. I always kid around with people. Because I said, people, it doesn't work for everyone. So they get mad at me. I'm like, hey, I never said it worked for anyone but me, to be quite honest. But my favorite Yasso 800, there's actually 2 of them. But my favorite, the one where this Russian guy was telling me about Yasso 800s. And he said, oh yeah, this famous Russian scientist found this formula. And I'm looking at this guy like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then we were at a race, and then they called me up on the stage, and he was like, wow, you're the Russian guy. I'm like, no, I'm not Russian, but I don't know what you were talking about. But my all-time favorite Yasso 800s, I was in Portland, Oregon, in a coffee shop, working on my laptop, having my coffee, and this young woman, maybe like 25 years old, walks into the coffee shop, and she recognized me, and she goes, you're Bart Yasso. And I said, yeah. And I was so happy. I wanted to talk to her, and she said, I curse your name every Wednesday night. And then she walked over to get coffee, walked away from me. And the whole coffee shop went silent because, you know, when you say something like that in a group of runners, everyone laughs. But this coffee shop thought I was some kind of evil person that I made this woman curse every Wednesday. I mean, it was so weird. Everyone's just talking in this coffee shop, doing their thing. And then this woman, she literally yelled at me, I curse you every Wednesday night. And then the whole place went quiet, and they stared at me. And then she went to get her coffee. Right. And I thought, wow, hopefully she'll come over and talk to me. And then she was just wanting to get her coffee, and then came back and talked to me. We had a great conversation. Right. But I did tell her, I said, you do know this whole coffee shop thinks I'm some evil person that makes you curse every Wednesday night. But obviously, I guess once people realized that we were chatting and having a great conversation, I wasn't that bad of a person. But it really, Yasso 800s are not based on science at all. It's just my favorite workout, 10 times 800, 400 meter recovery. And I always did 10 times 800. A lot of people think you can do 3 or 5 or whatever. You can do that if you're not used to going to the track, but the workout is 10 times 800, 400 meter recovery. I would always warm up 3 miles, cool down 3 miles. I'd also do a lot of strides and stuff before. So warm up 3 miles, some strides, and then do the workout. Finish the workout, do some more strides, and then out for 3 miles to cool down. So it's probably about maybe a 12 and a half, something like that, 12 and a half miles. It was a serious workout to do on a Wednesday night.
Right. The gist of it is you run those 800s, and whatever the average pace is for those 800s. So if you're doing 3 minutes for those 800s, you should run a 3-hour marathon.
Right. That's the deal. So the correlation between your 800 in minutes and seconds versus your marathon time in hours and minutes, but the correlation's the same. And that's what I saw in these training logs, and no clue, that there was this correlation. And then I told MB Burfoot about it, gentleman a lot of you Boston buddies know, because he won the Boston Marathon, and he was the editor at Runner's World for many, many years. MB won the Boston Marathon in 1968. And he was the one that said, oh my God, we were rooming together at a race, and I told him I'm going out to do that workout so I know what I can run in 2 weeks. And he just thought I was crazy. And then when I came back from doing the 800 workout, and I told him, I think I'll run right around 241 next 2 weeks. And that's exactly what I did. And once he put that connection together, he said, oh, we're going to do a big story in Runner's World about it. And I told him, I said, hey, I know it works for me. I'm not saying it works for everybody. And he said, don't worry about it. And then he didn't tell me that he was going to name him after me. But he said, Yasso is such an unusual name. And he said, I think it'll stick. And I didn't believe him, but he was right. And then the story was in Runner's World in 1993. And then right after the story came out, this thing called the internet started happening. And then that is how Yasso 800 spread globally, and I think got popular. I don't think if the internet was around, it wouldn't have taken off like they did. But, I thought, okay, people read a magazine, it's like in a July issue for a month, they'll talk about it, and then it'll just disappear. And that did not happen, because that was 1993. And there's not a day in my life that I don't either get some kind of message, text, Facebook message, Twitter, Instagram message, whatever, tweet about Yasso 800s. I mean, literally every day of my life.
Mostly positive, I hope.
Yeah, majority of them are positive. But
Right.
occasionally someone will send me a link and they'll say, hey, Bart, you got to get on this thread. They're bashing Yasso 800s and they say they don't work. And I said, no, I don't have to get on any thread. I never said they worked for anyone but me. I mean, that's exactly what I told Amby.
Right.
And so if they don't work for someone, that's fine. They don't work for them. That's their deal, and I'm fine with that. I don't ever get on any of these threads that defend Yasso 800s. I don't need to do that.
Amby's actually in our group. He is a Boston buddy. He's been in the group.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Amby's an amazing guy. He was a really great person to work for. I worked for Amby for many years.
Yeah.
Worked with him, and he's a genius of a guy. He's just he was an incredible runner at all distances. He was a pretty good indoor track guy. Of course, wins the Boston Marathon and did a lot of the Olympic trials in the marathon back in his day. But as great a runner as he was just a prolific writer and just a really talented writer. And he always had the pulse on what was going on in the running community. It was pretty cool to work for someone that was that smart and that engaged. He was certainly a mentor for me for many, many, many years.
He did a movement yesterday. He's getting people to put masks on the statues. Like
okay.
The John Kelly statue, they put the masks on there. Marty Clark actually helped him out and put one on Joe Benoit's statue.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds like Amby. He's an unbelievable guy. He's run this race on Thanksgiving Day in Manchester, Connecticut for, I believe it is 58 years in a row. He's run this race that's held on Thanksgiving Day.
Wow.
He has a streak of running the same race once a year for 58 years, if you can imagine that. That's a pretty impressive streak.
Right. That's dedication. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about some of the other things? You were elected into the Running USA Hall of Champions too, right?
Yeah. So I do talk to runners about, my tagline has been, especially since my book came out, never limit where running can take you. And I mean that obviously geographically, but I also mean in many other facets of running. I got inducted in the Running USA Hall of Champions and the Roadrunners Club of America Distance Running Hall of Fame. And, when you get these inductions, the other group of people that I was inducted with, a lot of them had won the Boston Marathon, have an Olympic medal to their claim. But, I was inducted because of what I've done for the sport. And that, it means the world to me, but I always try to get that message to other runners. You don't have to win the Boston Marathon or win Olympic medals to really make an impact on our sport. It's, what you can do through, what you're doing, Vince, through this Facebook page, engaging with people and helping people. And there's a lot of ways our sport, you can really be active and really promote our sport. And I'm pretty sure that's why I got inducted to both of those places, because the people I got inducted with were much faster than I am. But it's pretty cool to be on the stage on something like that. When I got inducted at the Roadrunners Club of America, I was in a pretty rough spot at the time. I had a death in my family. I was literally going to get inducted and then leave to go to the funeral. And so it wasn't really a happy time for me. And I was actually very sick at the time. But, you get inducted in the Hall of Fame, I had to be there. But I just remember doing my speech, and I was so happy I was able to pull it off. And then I walk off the stage, and I was just torn apart physically, just in rough shape, and the whole emotion of the whole thing. And I was only maybe 10 feet off the stage, and who comes up to hug me but Mev Keflezighi, which was pretty cool.
Right.
And then heading back to my seat, and then Dina Castor came over and gave me a hug. They both knew I was in pretty rough shape. It was cool that our sport has these people that are at the highest level, like a Mev or a Dina, and they embrace everybody, which is really cool. I'll never forget that, because that was a highlight for me. Not so much the induction to the Hall of Fame, but just to what I talked about and what I preached of the power of our running community to physically, have that hit me as I came off that stage. I
Right.
don't know how many people are in that room, like 500 people when it goes on. And the two most iconic runners in that room were greeting me when I came off the stage, which was pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, it's a different sport. I mean, I slowly meet the celebrity runners. They're all very approachable. They're all very just down to earth, nice people. It seems like it's
Yes,
different than other sports.
I would agree. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's they're talented as any other sport, if you compare them to other sports, but it just we just create a community in running, and it wasn't like that when I started running in the 70s. Trust me, it was but somewhere in the 80s things really changed. The sport really became more engaging, and it grew so much. And
right.
then women started coming into the sport in droves, and things really changed. And races changed. Races just became more of a accepting of a place, because in the old days, man, if you weren't really a good runner, you were not encouraged, and you were not treated very well at a race. You came in and they were tearing everything down, and
Right.
they weren't like, "Hey, you got that cross the finish line," or whatever. They were like, "What the hell took you so long?" I mean, it was a different world. I always felt bad for people coming in the back of the pack in the old days.
Right.
Well, not treated well.
Yeah, I think I learned that really when I started this group because I was a solo runner, and when this group started, I just needed some help, kind of getting motivated to run, and the people, strangers, just started reaching out and encouraging each other, and we learned a lot about each other because everybody was kind of going through some sort of struggle or something in their own life, and
Yep.
they turn to running to get through it, and it bonds a lot of people. There's a lot of people in our group that have similar stories or similar backgrounds, and they form their own little groups. It
Yeah,
becomes yeah,
that is really true. You don't know people's story. I always try to get people to share their story. One of my quotes in the last book that I wrote when I was leaving Runner's World, I announced my retirement about a year before I retired, just because I wanted people to know I was serious about retirement. And so I wrote this book called Race Everything, because everyone at Runner's World said, "Dude, you've raced everything from races that were a mile long to 146 miles long, races at the Arctic Circle, Antarctica, Iceland. I mean, I went everywhere." And they
hmm
said, "You got to do this book and call it Race Everything and put it all out there." So I did that. But when I worked on Race Everything, I thought of one of my quotes that stuck with me, and still sticks to me to this day. And the quote is, "When the gun goes off, we all follow the same path to the finish line, but each of us has taken a unique path to the starting line." And when I first wrote that, I was like, okay, that's you're thinking like when you first go to that starting line, it's your first race, but it's really not that. There's ups and downs. I've been doing this stuff for 43 years. There's a lot of roller coasters. So sometimes when I get to the starting line, after I was pretty sick for quite a while, it brings back what's special about our sport and our community.
yeah,
Uh, and so sometimes you take a different path to a starting line, even within your running career, as setbacks happen,
yep,
and you just gotta get through the setback and make the comeback.
yeah. I think the running community, like you said, is more accepting of back of the Packers and things like that because nobody knows each other's story. Uh,
That that's the
it's
truth.
the cancer survivors and things like that, or they're running
Yeah.
for somebody else, raising funds, and it doesn't matter their time. It's more they're just there to shed some light on a cause, or just trying to prove something to themselves. And
Right.
we've all been there.
Yeah, whenever I see like E60, some of these shows on ESPN, like E60 or 30 for 30,
hmm
I think, God, if those guys came to running races, they could get 1,000 stories.
Right.
But they stick to the big sports, and I understand that's where the bread and butter is. They
I
stick to
get
the
it.
big four: football, baseball, basketball, hockey. But if they would ever venture in the running, we have a lot of E60 stories in our running community that would blow people away, how much people overcome just to get to the starting line. And then across that finish line, that's the icing on the cake.
I think they could start with you. I think that would be a slam dunk.
Yeah, yeah. I get a lot of I get so much email and communications of people, how I inspire them. And I'm in real life, I'm a shy person. So I never really ask, like, how do I inspire you or what do I inspire you? I just thank them and tell them the run community inspires me. Uh, but I did have overcome a couple things along the way. But I meet people that just the odds are so against them. It's just mind-boggling to me that they can do what they do.
Yeah.
And they really, I always said, I used to say this to Ambi, and when I worked with David Willey, who was our editor in chief after Ambi, and all the other editors I worked with, like, I never walked into like a race expo or go to a big race and say, "Hey, come tell me your story." But for some reason, runners would tell me their story, and so a lot of the big stories that ended up in runners' world were, feature stuff. Were some of those stories where I was able to find a person. I didn't even work on the story at all, other than just get it going.
Right.
Back from the race and say, "Hey, this is a story." And then and it goes from there. And then some just make it on the website, some make it big time. But I'll give you an example. When on trips, I always do the race announcing at the Little Rock Marathon. And one of the years I was there, this woman, Amy Downs, I got introduced to Amy. And one of my friends, Mark Bravo, said, you gotta talk to Amy. You gotta hear her story. So, I was just said, "Hey, Amy, what's going on? Tell me your story." And man, when she started, when she finished 5 minutes later, I mean, I was hyperventilating. I just, and her story still gets me today. She was she's from Oklahoma City. She was in the Murrah building when it was bombed. She was
Oh,
one
wow.
of the people that survived, but
Mhm.
she was buried alive.
Oh, wow.
Now, at the time, she wasn't a runner. In fact, she was actually obese. And her obesity is the only reason she's alive. She was buried under concrete. And all the paramedics and the first responders that found her said if she wasn't a big woman, her organs would have been crushed to death. But she was slumped over her desk with all this debris laying on her back. She had a little place to breathe, and she was just waiting. Hopefully somebody would save her. But I mean, being buried alive, I can't think of anything more scary than that.
Wow. How long
And
was she under there?
I don't remember exactly, but a while. And
Okay.
she has all these scars on her body from all the concrete and stuff laying on top of her. But anyway, these brave first responders got her out of there. And, then she lived, and then she said, I got a second lease on life, literally. I'm going to change and not be this obese person. And then a couple of years later, the Oklahoma City Marathon started. It's a memorial marathon. And what the Oklahoma City Marathon did that first year, their pasta dinner, they had survivors serve pasta to the runners. And Amy was one of those people, of course. She was a survivor. And then they saw these runners and said, "Hey, these people aren't like crazy people. They're actually fun to be around." And then she became a runner, went on to do half Ironmans and stuff. It just amazes me that she could have gone from an obese woman to finishing marathons, and let alone surviving being buried alive. I mean,
Yeah.
that's her story still shakes me up. And when you're looking into somebody's eyes and they tell you a story like that, it's pretty it gets you. It
Yeah.
just gives you the chills.
Yeah. There's a lot of
You're
stories like
kind
that.
of putting yourself in her shoes. Never, and as I say, you can visually see the scars she has on her body from what happened to her, but you cannot see what's happened, what goes through her mind. I'm sure those scars are much tougher than the physical scars she has on her body.
Yeah.
That, I mean, she was just sitting at her desk doing her job,
Yeah.
and her life
That's
was changed
amazing.
forever.
Yeah. That's like Lori Riggles is one of the members in our group. Lori's
Yes.
the first story in the Boston Buddies book. She was
Yep.
hit while training by a truck. And
Yeah.
was out in a coma. Was told she'd never run again, never walk again. She was able to figure it out, and
Yeah.
she ran Boston last year with us as a charity runner for the Quell Foundation, and she's
Wow.
running today. She's doing great. She's a great story. If you get to meet her in person, she's a really great
Yeah.
person.
No, I remember her story in the book, but that's just that kind of stuff just amazes me that
Yeah,
people can really overcome that much. So
that's when
that,
we've
as
got
you
our
meant,
own.
you said those words. You never know someone's story. So
Yeah,
they come strolling across the finish line of a marathon at 6 hours. You know you can't say, "Oh, that person didn't train. What the heck are they doing?" You don't know.
right.
Some of these people to run the marathon 6 hours is unbelievable.
Yep. Yeah, that's like our own Tim Moley when
Right.
he in 2017 he did it on crutches, the
Yeah.
whole marathon on crutches with a bad knee. Yeah.
There's no one like Moley. He's something else, man. But you
He's
talk
actually
about determination and toughness. The guy's unbelievable.
Well, he was a professional boxer actually, so he's
Wow.
tough. He knows how to
He's
take a
tough.
punch. Yeah,
Yeah. And then I
yeah.
remember Gene Dykes could be one of the toughest people, could be the toughest runner out there right now.
He just did
He
100
just
miles.
finished 100 miles in 24 hours at age 72.
Yeah,
He talked about how tough it is. That backyard ultra, the quarantine backyard ultra, is still going on. It's just two guys, Michael Wardian and a guy from the Czech Republic, Reddick Bruner is his last name, and they're still duking it out. They're well over 200 miles, and one of them won't give.
wow. They
Yeah.
started what, Saturday morning?
I just tweeted, I said, since these guys have started, I've slept 16 hours and I've only run 4 miles.
Right,
And I look tired and beat up, and these guys they look great. I don't know how they
right,
do it.
right.
They've been awake for 2.5 days and running. They're up over 200. They're closing in on 250 miles.
Yeah. And Michael Wardian, he's like 47 or so.
Michael's got to be in his, yeah.
He's in his late 40s. Yeah.
Yeah, he's in his late 40s. That is for sure. And the guy, he looks great right now. I don't know how he does it. He's a personal friend of mine. I've been texting him, telling him, dude, you're unbelievable. And
Yeah.
Gene, it's amazing what he did. Like, I know he just didn't have a really good day. He wanted to run more, but just to cover 100 miles in 24 hours, running by yourself during a quarantine. I mean, it's tough times right now. People just aren't themselves because
Yeah.
of the situation we're all in. And for people to do some of these extraordinary things, it just amazes me.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like I guess what you've done Badwater, right? Badwater 146.
Yeah, I did Badwater 31 years ago. Thank God it was before I was ever sick, and I was a lot younger. But I did it as a work assignment for Runner's World. I wasn't sitting in my office saying, "Hey, I got to do some of these ultras." In fact, I was always saying, I knew I was gonna do ultra someday, but I was like pushing it back. Like, I'm gonna wait till I'm tired of doing marathons or wear myself out in the marathon, and then I'll try an ultra. But I got thrown into it in this meeting at Runner's World. The Badwater at that point has happened twice, but nobody knew about this race. I mean, literally nobody knew about it because when we were in the meeting, with Amby, the whole staff, everyone in the room never heard of the race. And they said, okay, we work at Runner's World. We've never heard of this race. We're agreeing that nobody knows about this crazy race that's 146 miles long in Death Valley in July in these crazy temperatures. So the whole premise was someone from Runner's World has to do the race. And then we'll do the story. And then everyone will know about the race. And Amby and everyone else in the room, they'll say, okay, the only one who'll do it will be Bart. So we'll send him there. And I'm like, I'm not an ultra guy. And they said, well, you can do this race. You'll be fine. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And then kind of forgot about it for a while. It was like in February. The race is in July. Kind of wasn't really on my radar. And then sometime around April or May, I said, hey, this is serious. We better get going on this thing. Make travel arrangements, all that kind of stuff. And I said, yeah, maybe I get serious about training for this thing. But I was training like a marathoner, so I was not in, I was in good shape.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's different running 146 miles, obviously, than running 26.2. I do remember that when they started the race, guy had like a little starter pistol that he was going to shoot, and he said, welcome to the start of the Badwater 146. He's screaming. There were only 6 people in the race. He didn't have to yell that loudly. We were standing right next to him. But, like a big ceremonious thing. Welcome to the start. And he's ready to shoot this guy. He said Badwater 146. And that's where that 146 kind of got stuck in my head. And I'm like, I never ran past 26.2. This is a long way.
Right.
And I was like, and that's when I did the math right there. It was 120 miles longer than I've ever run.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's pretty scary, actually. And it really is 123 degrees in the afternoon. It's hot.
Oh, wow.
And but that 120 miles longer than I've ever run thing stuck in my head. And I just remember just thinking, I had that mindset every mile I ran in my life up to that point. All the miles under my belt were done for this reason. So just go out there and pace yourself and enjoy the day
Right.
for a day and a half.
How do you,
And
how
yeah,
do you
but
keep yourself?
it was beautiful. I mean, Death Valley is such a unique place and a beautiful place, and I just got sucked up in the surroundings. And I had a good crew, 2 people from Runner's World, Bob Wishney and Jane Cirrus, who were really good crew people. Everyone had to have crew, and they were really great. And then I had the whole staff at Runner's World behind me, which was really cool. But this is way before the communications we have today. No cell phones, no computers. It was calling in the voicemail back in those days and using calling cards and checking in with the office. But there was also at the time, 1989, now Death Valley is a national park. In 1989, Death Valley was what was called a national monument. It wasn't a park. It wasn't a national park. So it was
Mhm.
just preserved. So there wasn't the infrastructure that's, the facilities that are in the park today, they weren't there back in 89. I thought when we started running, I remember we saw one car for, I think in the first 46 miles, we saw one car,
Mhm.
46 miles of running on a road. To see one car tells you there was nobody there.
There's
And
nothing out there.
it's crazy. And then, I remember everyone talks about the heat, but there's actually some serious hills. You climb Towns Pass, which is 17 miles long. You climb about 6,000 feet. The Panamint Range, you climb another 10-mile descent, followed by a 12-mile ascent. And then, of
Mhm.
course, the very end, as you work your way up to the finish line at the highest peak in the contiguous 48 states, the finish line was at 14,500 feet. And you do most of that climbing in the last 11 miles. Last 11 miles, you go from 9,000 feet to 14,500 after you run at that point 135 miles.
Wow.
So now that's where they end. Now it's become the Badwater 135. So they don't go up the mountain anymore on the trail. They just finish at what's known as the Whitney Portals.
Okay.
But yeah, going up that mountain is get up to 14,500 feet. It's a lot cooler. You're out of the crazy temperatures, but you're at serious elevation, and it's the highest peak in the contiguous 48. It's a pretty view up there in the Sierra Nevadas, and
I bet.
it was, I can honestly say it was fun the whole way. I'm not saying it wasn't arduous. It was pretty hard to do, but doing that as a work assignment was just so different. It was. I just had to finish the thing. That was the whole deal. And
How did
then
you
we
get
did the
crew support? Like how did that work? Because like you said, you didn't have a cell phone. How did
yeah.
they?
So they just cruise along in a little RV that we had, and they would just go up ahead about 2 miles, and then I would cover that 2 miles, and they would take my bike water bottles from me and give me 2 new ones. I mean, you drink nonstop,
Okay.
and so they always kept their eye on me, made sure I was safe, and My crew took, they really watched over me. They made it doable and made sure I was hydrated all the time. But that heat is, people say it's a dry heat, which is really true. It is a dry heat, but man, it's hot.
Right.
It's when the ambient air is 123 to 125, the black top's about 150, and then if you bury some thermometer in the sand, it'll go up to about 165 degrees, and you're running right next to the sand on this black top.
Right.
This heat radiating.
Your shoes could melt.
Yeah, the shoes do melt. It's hot. Let me tell you,
Yeah,
it is hot.
I believe it. But you've also one of the big accomplishments was winning the marathon too, or at least you won the Smoky Mountain Marathon, right?
Yeah,
1998.
Smoky Mountain was a cool race for me to win because I was 43 or 44 at the time, and I thought my days of winning races was over. But it was after I was really sick, and when I was really sick, I running was not even remotely in the equation. When I finally was able to go back to my office at Runner's World, I struggled to walk around my office. Running was not in the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I got better over time and the treatments I was on. And then I got back out there and started running a little bit. And then, when you get something that you really love taken away from you, you get a little bit of hunger in in that belly that I really want to do a couple races. And so I went to Smoky Mountain Marathon. It was 98. Yeah, it was in February of 98. And I remember going there, and it was a hilly course right outside of Knoxville, and pretty tough course. Big hill at mile, I think it was 18. I think 18 to 20, 18 to 21 was this 3 mile climb, and all the runners drove the course and wanted to see this, climb, and I didn't do that. I said, hey. Going to see it, it's not going to change. It's going to be there tomorrow when we do the race. So I didn't worry about it. But that's where I took the lead at the base of the hill, and I cruised up that hill. And my mindset was, I was fine on this hill. I always run hills at home, so I'm ready to go.
Right.
And I was thinking these other runners obsessed about this hill. That's all they talked about at the dinner the night before the race. And I'm like, I'm here because of this hill. I love hilly courses. And I just remember taking that lead thinking, and then we got up top of that hill, and then I realized was a little out and back section. I realized I had a pretty good lead at the top of the hill, and I thought, dang, I'm going to win this thing. I thought those days were over. It was really fun to do.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a real, one of the running highlights of my career. I have a lot of highlights. A lot of them aren't about running. It's really about the people and stuff that happens outside of running, but that was certainly one of my running highlights for sure.
One of the funnest stories I've read from your book was when you had to run with the burro.
Yeah, that was another race that it sounded so easy when I was in my office, go run 10K, they're going to give you a burro and you got to hold on to the burro with a rope and they,
Explain what a
10-kilometer
burro is.
run, like what could go wrong? I like animals.
Right.
I had no idea that they gave me this burro named Taco Bell, who was just the meanest thing and didn't like me and literally drugged me down the road in those first 2 miles. I had no clue this animal would go so fast. And I was hanging on for dear life thinking, I remember we went to that first mile and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die in a burro race. I cannot run this fast. This animal is crazy. And then about halfway through the race, after 2 miles, the burro started slowing down, and then I was in front of the animal pulling it along. And then by 3 or 4 miles, the animal doesn't even want to move anymore. They lock their legs and you drag this thing because it's a race. There's other runners and they're pulling this animal and they're stubborn. It's crazy.
Right.
I just remember when I finished that thing, I thought, oh my God, this thing was so hard. It was so crazy. It was not what I expected. I thought, when I said what could go wrong, there were 100 things that went wrong in that race.
Right.
But the other runners that I was raced against, they're actually burro racers and they own their animal and they know what they're doing. I was a complete amateur didn't run with the burro literally till the gun went off. Not the way you want to go into a race like that. I learned the hard way.
Right. And you had to
yeah.
take it with you everywhere, right? Even if you had to take
Oh yeah, I remember.
yeah,
like I had to pee like 3 minutes before the start, and I'm like, I gotta take this animal. I ran over to this tree and pee behind this tree, and this burro's pulling me away, and I'm trying to pee behind the tree. I was hysterical, and everyone's laughing at me because everyone knows what I'm doing. I'm just trying to take a pee break before we start running, and Taco Bell wanted no part of it, man. He was abusing me even before the race started.
Now you also did 5 Ironmans too, right?
Yeah, I don't talk about that stuff, but I actually used to be a pretty good triathlete. I used to run a lot of triathlons in the mid 80s to the late 80s, and then I got away from that stuff when I took my job at Runner's World and thought I should really just concentrate on running.
Okay.
But yeah, I did qualify for Ironman and do Hawaii and all that stuff, but it's one of those things. It was fun to do. It's not it's a past memory these days because we're talking 30 some years ago. But
right.
It was fun to do. I always liked the bike, and I still ride. And I was, to be honest, I was always a better cyclist than I was a runner. I really did always had the fast bike split, and I was just good at it.
Mm-hmm.
But those days are long gone. The last Ironman I did was Hawaii in 2000. So I qualified for Hawaii at Ironman Canada, and then did Ironman Hawaii. And I just remember finishing the thing saying, okay, I'm glad I did this, but I'm not going to do this anymore. It's just too, I didn't want, it was hard to train with all the travel I was doing for work.
Yep.
And I just, I was really starting to feel the effects of all the stuff that was happening to my body. And I just thought, okay, it's fun to do, but time to move on.
Right.
And I haven't done one since. Been tempted to do one every once in a while, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. I have not graduated there yet. I can't swim, so I don't think.
Yeah, you got to be able to swim. That's one of the deals. You don't want to get pulled out of the water. You got to get out there. And that's one of the things I never enjoyed about the, cycling, I just cycle right out my door, and same with running. Mm-hmm. But swimming, I always had to go to a pool, and used to do some open water swimming at some lakes in Pennsylvania, but it just wasn't convenient. And running and cycling seemed so convenient. So I never really, even though I was a decent swimmer, I never really took the swimming that seriously. Mm-hmm. Biking was a different story. I really liked to ride the bike.
How about Boston? How many times have you run Boston?
So Boston, I know my first was 1982, the Duel in the Sun. And then I remember 83, 84, 85, 86. And then I don't know. After 86, so in 87 is when I started working at Runner's World. And then it changed going to Boston because I would go there as work.
Yeah.
And I really got away from doing it. And, at first I was sad about that. But then what happened was I ended up doing so many different races all over the place. So, it turned out to be all right in the end. But I was like you, I thought I would do the Boston every year forever.
Right.
How could you not do the Boston Marathon? But it just, my life changed. And then stopped doing it. And stuff happens. But I know I attended the Boston Marathon every year from 82 to 2017. So I had a nice stretch of always being at the race.
Gotcha.
But it was, those early 80s, I was always running it. And then when I got my job at Runner's World, it was always going there to work.
Right.
So not running it, but it was fun to go there, to work. It was, it wasn't a hardship. It was awesome. I got to witness some amazing finishes of that race.
Any tips for the first timers as far as how to run that course?
Yeah, you really don't believe how much a downhill it is early on until I ran it the other direction one time, and then you really understand how much downhill happens early in that race. And then you really realize if you run a smart race in the first 5 miles, you can run a good time on the Boston course. But
Mhm.
you have to run smart for those first 5 miles. And then when I say smart, you have to run with the hill. You can't, what people think, okay, they say don't run too fast in those first couple miles because of the downhills. So sometimes they run too slowly and lean back and change their stride to slow themselves down. And that's the worst thing you could do. What you need to do is just slow down that or ease up on that stride length a little bit. Still run perpendicular to the hill, but just back off on that length of your stride, which will back off on your pace.
Mhm.
And just once you get off those hills, then you do get some flat area you can get in a groove. And then of course you got the Newton hills, which are not tough hills, but they just come at a tough spot.
Right.
And then again, you will not believe how much downhill is from 21 and
Yeah.
a half to the finish. But I ran in reverse one time and I was like, dang, there's so much downhill, it's crazy.
Right.
And I don't remember that when I was running it.
Right.
But there's nothing like, right on Hereford and left on Boylston. I mean, there's nothing like it in sport. And I would love to run it again sometime because I would like to do the right-hand turn on Hereford and the
Mhm.
left on Boylston the way you guys do it, because that wasn't like that in the 80s. We actually ran across Boylston Street and went down a driveway, literally a entranceway to a parking deck, and that's where the finish line was.
Mhm.
And then after you crossed the finish line and walked a little bit, you were underground in a parking deck.
Right.
You're like,
Like you just
wow,
shoot.
didn't I just finish the Boston Marathon? And you're like you're like, where am I?
Right.
You think it's a dream, like I'm in a parking garage. What the heck just happened? But that was the old finish in the old days.
Wow.
They use a road called Ring Road, and you're about 100 meters down after you cross Boylston Street. So you came up Hereford as it's pronounced, came up Hereford, and instead of turning left on Boylston, you actually went a little bit to the right and cross Boylston, and then the left-hand turn to this literally an access road to the parking deck.
Mhm.
And you disappear in the parking deck after you finish. It's crazy.
So you never experienced the new finish line because there's
I
nothing
think, well,
like
they
it.
eventually, I think maybe 85 or 86 when I did it, we did then go down Boston a little bit more, when it really became a prize money race. And I think it did change to Boston, but not like it is now. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't, you know, it was so much different. There weren't as many people in the race and there weren't as many people out on the course as there is today. The spectators were not in the millions like they are today.
Right.
And of course, the field size was much smaller. Yeah, it was much different. And the pageantry wasn't there. When you came along, if you ran the pace that I was running, when you run, I was right always around, in that 240 range when you came in. I think I ran I didn't break 240 at Boston. I was 240 and some change, but I did break 40 if you count chip time, but we didn't have chip time. So
Mhm.
we used to hit our watch when we crossed the starting line and then when you crossed the finish line, and that's what the personal time we ran by. But
Right.
that's not the time you got in the results. And there was no chip timing back then. So I know I ran 230 on my watch, 239 on my watch, but it was 240 in the results. But I just remember, when you came like me, we were, you know, there were already people moving out on the road and stuff like that. It was not,
Right.
they really concentrated on they kept those spectators back and everyone till like the first women went by. And then after probably like the top 3 women went by, then the people came off the sidewalks and created this tunnel that you ran through, which was actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
But it was hard to pass someone if you were feeling good and trying to pass people. It was crazy.
Well, it's
Now they
hard to
have
explain.
now everything's barricaded and it's so much different.
It's hard to explain. Like when you come out from that underpass, you come up the street and then you make that right on Hereford, and it's just lined with people, and it's so loud you can't hear yourself think
Yeah.
coming through that tunnel basically, and then you
Yeah.
turn
Yeah. And that tunnel's a new addition in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe 5 or
Mhm.
6 years. because you used to just stay on Commonwealth Ave and then make the right. But then they thought if they use that tunnel, they can use Mass Ave to get vehicles out of there. So that's why they did that, which was a smart move for the race to do.
Right.
But yeah, you guys disappear in that tunnel and then come up to Hereford and make that right and that classic left on Boylston. There's nothing like it in sport.
Right.
It's, again, I've been on Boylston for a lot of the finishes. It's pretty cool.
It's a little longer than you think, too.
600 meters is what everybody says. All the
Right.
experts, and of course McGilvery would tell us exactly. I don't know if Dave would tell us to the exact inch, but it is rounding off 600 meters, whether it's a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, but 600 meters on Boston. Hereford's only one block.
Right, but slightly uphill.
Slightly uphill, and then get on Boston, and I'm really convinced there's nothing like it in sport.
Yeah, and as an amateur, like there aren't many sports where amateurs can get out there and run with the pros or compete with the pros. You got Pro-Am in golf. I don't know what else there is besides running, really.
Yeah, but even like the Pro-Am in golf, you got to be pretty good to play in the Pro-Am.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, you can't be like, and again, I know people qualify for Boston, but I mean, Pro-Am, you still have to be like an exceptional golfer to make the amateur part of it.
A scratch or a 1 or 2.
Yes, you got to be, it would be like a sub 2:30 marathoner comparison.
Right. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So Boston, it is, I hear a lot of people talk about, I see all this chatter always about the charity runners at Boston. And let me tell you, the charity runners at Boston are such an essential part of the race.
Yeah.
You really help the Boston Marathon. They bring in so much money. They do a lot of the charities are Boston based. And, you have to think that the Boston Marathon goes through 10 municipalities.
Yep.
And you have to appease all 10. And the charity program appeases a lot of people. And it's one of the many reasons a lot of the communities love the race, because it raises so much money for local charities. So back, when I was doing it in the early 80s, there were bandits everywhere. There weren't charity runners. The charity runner thing didn't exist, but there were bandit runners everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The original qualifying times, I had to run, guys my age had to run 250 and women had to run 320. And that was the deal. And so there weren't as many people that could qualify for the race. So people used to run as a bandit. But they were always respectful. You always saw when you were at the start line, the people on the side that were spectators were in running clothes because they were going to start running after the people with bib numbers left. So the BAA was good about if you got out on the road for the start, you had to have a bib number on. And then once everyone with bib numbers started running, then all these people would just jump out and start running the race.
Right.
And I think a lot of it were, they knew they weren't going to qualify and they just wanted to do the Boston Marathon. So what was happening was the BAA would find out like, okay, we still got to support these people and put water out there for these people because they're going to run the race no matter what we say. We can't like go out and arrest them or something. So,
right.
So I think that's when they really realized that there's all these people out there. They don't give the BAA a penny and they're out there running the Boston Marathon.
Right.
So that's when the charity program really started and said, okay, we do have a way now. If you can't run the 250 for men or 320 for women, you can be part of a charity and it's a good thing to do. And so it stopped the bandits from being in the race.
Right.
And that's a good thing.
Well, originally they didn't put the time restrictions in there because they wanted it to be elites. They wanted to control the size of it. They thought that the towns couldn't handle that many runners. It wasn't to make it.
Yeah, and I think they really, from a lot of people I talked to when the standards really got tough when they went to 250 and 320, 250 for the guys and 320 for the women, they really wanted they said, okay, the diehard runners are in the Boston area. We're going to put these tough standards on and this is our race. The people from Boston are going to, Boston area are going to do this race.
Right.
Then, but the exact opposite happened. It fueled runners around the country to meet those qualifying times.
Right.
So then I believe it became more of an international race, and more runners from all over the country were doing it because of that.
Right.
And and then they made the standards easier, and as you guys know, then that they started making them tougher again. But they're not nearly as tough as the old days. They were pretty.
250. Yeah.
Yeah, when they first did it, and then of course they said, okay, we got to figure out the age group, so they just did 250 for guys under 40 and 310 if you're over 40. And that didn't mean if you were 99 years old, you still had to run 310, which is crazy.
Right.
And then the women were just 320, one standard. And then they started rolling out the age groups as time went on. But that didn't happen for quite a while.
Right.
So it really was it was a much different deal when you look at the results. Everyone ran fast times because you got to run a fast time to get in the race.
Yeah.
Not saying the standards aren't fast now, but they're not as fast as back then.
Yeah.
So when I get all these emails and stuff like, oh my God, I did qualify, but I didn't get in. And they think I can make a change. And I'm like, no, I can't make a change. This is what the BAA owns this race, and it's their doing. But I said, trust me, you got it easy. I had to run 20 minutes faster than you ran.
Right. When you
but
qualify next time, it'll make it seem that much sweeter,
Yeah. So I don't know what they're going to do with the changes they got to deal with now. It's really interesting. There's going to be 5 majors in the fall. Hopefully running will get back to normality, go back to the way it used to be, and we'll be out there running. And there will be Boston, Berlin, New York, Chicago, and London all in the fall of 2020. That's mind-boggling to think about. I mean, 5 world majors in I think it's going to be like a 7-week window, I believe, something like that.
Yeah, Boston, I think, is the first, and then
and then
last, the 14th through November 4th or something,
I think it's a 7-week window, something like that. It's crazy. These are the big races.
The good news might be, because depending on when Boston actually opens up registration, if they open it up like they normally do every year in September, basically it's the day after the marathon this year. There's nobody that's getting a BQ from now until then. So there's a lot of races that haven't been held. So hopefully it's easier to get in, and everybody that qualifies gets in this year.
That would be nice. We'll see how that all shakes out. I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully we will be back up and running by then. I don't know. Still, I mean, no one knows, to be quite honest. We're still in the midst of this stuff, and no one knows the true outcome. So hopefully things will start, in another month or so, going back to somewhat what we used to be able to do. And then, but I honestly think there's going to be a couple changes in our sport that are just become the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be the way we congregate in places and expos and things like that. I think they're really going to make some changes, so there's just not throngs of people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Boston Marathon Expo is just packed all the time. I mean, packed.
Yep.
And I don't think they can do that anymore. Even as this virus dies down, they don't think that it's going to be completely dead and the vaccine won't be out. So I don't know what the future is with crowds, but I believe there's going to be changes.
Yeah.
Not only I'm talking about concerts, sporting venues, everything, and running races are going to fall into whatever that the new norm is going to be.
The future.
Yes, there you go.
The virtual Molly Mile race.
The virtual, yeah. So the quarantine backyard ultra, of course, is a virtual. Everybody's running wherever they live.
Right.
And a lot of people did it on treadmills. If you're not familiar with the quarantine backyard ultra, you gotta just Google it and tune into it. It's absolutely amazing where they do this 4.167 mile loop, and then you have to just start it every hour on the hour, and then the last person standing wins the race.
But this isn't the first year.
As we're doing this, they're up to 250 miles.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be, I believe the official race date was in June, and of course they knew they weren't going to be able to have it. So one of the runners that was entered in it, his last name is Proctor. I believe it's David. is his first name. I know his last name's Proctor. He was the one that got the idea to do it virtually, and then they all head out and did it. And some people did it on a treadmill in their garage, and some people. There's one guy running around the restaurant, like a long table in a restaurant, because he was quarantined. I mean, I don't know where he was, but they were not allowed to leave the building.
Right.
There was another guy, I think from Spain, who was not allowed to leave his house. He ran around his living room. I mean, these people were in this thing for 100 miles, running around your living room. I was in awe watching this thing online. It was amazing to witness. This dude ran around this, like a big restaurant table he was in it for, I'm going to say like 30 hours. I don't know how.
Sounds like something Molly would do.
Yeah. And then there was one guy that he was quarantined, couldn't leave his house, but he didn't have a treadmill, and someone got him a treadmill, and he was doing really well, and this treadmill shorted out or something. He had to drop out of the race because his treadmill gave out.
Broke the treadmill.
It broke, literally. Oh my God, I felt bad for him.
Wow.
But what an amazing thing. And these virtual runs are definitely a new thing, and I would say that they're not totally new. They've been around a little bit, but I think they're really going to hit another level, because I also think a lot of people are going to be afraid of crowds.
Yeah, for a little
while. They're not going to embrace some of these big races anymore because of that.
Right.
And they'll hit some of the smaller races, and I think a lot of people are going to have anxieties about being surrounded in big crowds.
Yep. Prepare for the worst, but hope for the best.
Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. We're running up about an hour here. This went real quick.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. This was great.
Hey, no problem, Vince. Anytime, my man. I love what you do. I love all the Boston buddies. I hope to get to meet more people. My girlfriend Ann and I got to meet some of the people at the run we did, and of course, I met a lot of the Boston buddies at Philly Marathon. So hopefully we'll meet more, and but just keep up the good work, inspire, just keep it going. Really connect, unite, and inspire, and we got to unite electronically because of what we're going through, and run solo. I mean, Ann and I, we did a run yesterday, and I started first, and she left the house 5 minutes later, and she was going to run faster than I can run, but we just didn't want to we just want people to run solo and run on the most desolate area you can find, just to cut down on crowds.
Yep.
So Ann and I just, we just don't, when we're out there, if we were running together, people don't know that we were a couple. I just don't want that group thing to happen.
Right.
Even if it's just two people, if you can run solo, it's the best thing we can do right now to really set the tone. Because what's happening, if people go out and run in groups, they're going to shut down running.
Right.
And we don't want that to happen. So right now they're, not everywhere, but here they are encouraging you can go out of your house to do the things like get food or go to a pharmacy, but you can also go out and get some exercise. So right now we have that opportunity. Don't pass it up. I tell people, I was at when I was in Kenya, one of my trips to Kenya, they were on a real lockdown, and I never experienced anything like it. You were not allowed out of the house or hotel or wherever you were from 6 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning. And I mean, you were not allowed out. And this was in Nairobi, Kenya. And I thought, this really isn't going to happen. And I remember looking out of my hotel room at 1 minute after 6, there was not one person on the street. And then I turned on the TV and they said, if you're caught out, you will be shot. And then if you survive, they're going to ask you what you were doing out on the street. And I thought, wow, they are serious. And these Jeeps would go down the street with these machine guns. And I'm like, man, they're for real. And there was nobody out on the street. Sun would come up 6 o'clock in the morning, and then people would start doing their thing and going to work and stuff like that. And the same thing, 6 o'clock at night, lockdown. I mean, it was a curfew that was enforced. And we don't want to get to that.
Why was it locked down? For a virus or for something else?
No, it was a political lockdown. They was the new president, and people said that the election was rigged, and they wanted to riot, and they said, okay, we're going to have a curfew. No one's going to go out at night and cause trouble. and nobody went out at night and caused trouble. Never. I mean, the curfew was unbelievable.
Wow.
Now, when I talk to runners that are in Italy and Spain, that's what they're going through now. They're locked in their houses. They can't go out. So we don't want to get that far. We want to really respect what's going on now. And run solo if you can.
Run solo, and I agree. And I think we also need to make sure we don't run the course on Marathon Monday. I know people are talking about don't do that.
Yeah. And this is a time to just go out and run a little bit and be happy that we can go out and run. This is not time to go out there and just keep on doing long runs and stuff, because you don't want to put yourself in danger and get sick. And you don't want to just, I just think that you could do something very simple and hurt yourself and then end up in a hospital. And you don't want to be in a hospital right now.
No.
We need all our great healthcare workers to be working on the people that are really battling for life. And we want them to be doing that. Praise all these healthcare workers. They're unbelievable.
I agree. We've got a lot of them on this page, and they're out there on the front lines. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got to wrap this up. I actually have to get back to work.
I got you, Vince. You'll retire someday. Retirement's an awesome gig, let me tell you.
All right, Bart. Thank you very much again. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Vince. Thank you, Boston buddies.
Bye-bye.
See you.